house, and if any Indian tries to stop me, I'll blast him.
You know, the only thing more pathetic than Indians on TV is Indians watching Indians on TV.
Hey everybody, it's Ian back again for another episode of Native Film Talk. Today I had a great conversation with Natalie Benally, and this is somebody that you may not have heard of, but certainly you need to keep an eye on because she will be doing much more things that are at a larger scale. I'm positive of it. I had a great chat with her. Just a very versatile, skilled individual. Very much like a, underground kind of band in a way. It's just like, I hope one day I can say that I knew Natalie or I knew of her way back when. We kind of talk about why she isn't more known. One is she stepped away from acting for a while and filmmaking in general. But I also think that she discusses how for a while she stepped away from it because Hollywood, the major, feature film industry just didn't really bring her in for roles because she didn't have the look, the Native American look. And we talk a little bit about that and how that is ultimately detrimental because you have people who are very versatile, who can do voice acting, who can dance and sing, and people that are very versatile like Natalie, but because she has more of an ethnically ambiguous look and gets frankly passes for Asian to people more often than Native American, at least in the Hollywood land. She kind of is asked more to compromise and say, well, we don't have any Native roles that you can play because you don't look readily apparently Native. We have these other roles that you can play. So she kind of took a moral stance and said, no, I'm not going to do that. That's not my choice. I don't plan to represent any other ethnic groups on screen other than my own. And because of that, it really affected her career, unfortunately. But she has a lot of other great things that she's working on. I mean, she's moved back into acting and trying to be a filmmaker more behind the camera, it sounds like now. And I really look forward to all the things that she has going on and has some work in progress. And I really hope that the things that she's working on gets picked up. And then you just meet some people and you're just like, man, I just really want that person to succeed, I think a lot of my enthusiasm for her is just like, man, I want this to pay off. It's kind of like you're just betting on that person, betting on that horse, I guess, almost in a way. You're just like, man, I hope this one works out. I just got a really good feeling. But also just an awesome person, just a wholesome individual, has a lot of things. Her heart's in the right place in a lot of ways with the youth, with representation especially. And I think that you have someone that's dealing with individuals who are trying to cast at an ethnically ambiguous level, or, oh, you don't really need to be Native, or, I feel like she would kind of course correct and be that person in the room that would gut check those individuals and try to keep them honest. And so I had a great conversation with Natalie, and I hope you all have a good one. Nice. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Natalie Benally, most famous on Navajo land for being Dory in the Navajo dubbed version of Finding Nemo. And that was fantastic. And I really wanted to bring you on because, talking about Native representation and talking about in film and television, we hear the big names like Zon McLarnon, Martin Sensmeyer, Kiowa Gordon, but it's very rare we hear about what's happening with people who are trying to who are working diligently and like working very hard and have this as a career, but really are not getting the spotlight that they want. And not to say that this is a platform for that. I'm just saying, like, I just want to know what that looks like and have that conversation, because something I would like for you to touch on eventually is, like, I didn't really know, like, I'm not in the film industry at all, but I'm just a huge fan. There's so much unpaid work you have to do to be a director and actor. You have to like do unpaid internships, unpaid work. And it's like, you're from Gallup, you're Navajo, you kind of know the world that we come from. I'm from the Res 2 and the Western Agency. It's so hard to like tell people, like especially youth, of like, hey, go out and climb the ladder, yada yada, do that whole thing. But then if you choose this career, you're really going to struggle for a while, and I think unless you come from means or you can really have a nest egg built up or are able to do kind of multiple side hustles, like it's pretty rough out there. But so thank you for coming on, and I kind of just wanted to explore that and then just talk about really where you are in your career and some of your accolades also.
Yeah, well, yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I'll introduce myself first. Yeah, it's Natalie Benally and Shia. Now, Habani slow touchy, you bashichin, and it's a chair to buy it a Chanel. A good out it in it essentially. So I'm Natalie. I'm born for the Gray Streak Ants People clan, born for the Red Running Ninja Water clan. My maternal grandparents' clan is the Zuni Pueblo People clan, and my paternal grandparents' clan is the Water's Edge People clan. Yeah, and I'm originally from Gallup, so just outside of Gallup in Springstead, New Mexico, on my mom's side of the family's land. So yeah, yeah, no, I was gonna say I appreciate you saying all of that because that's like one of my biggest, in terms of all the things that I've done and what I continue to do. A lot of what I am striving for is accessibility. Because I mean, as a young person on the res, like I really loved to do a lot of things. Like I loved to sing, I loved to dance, but there really wasn't a place for me to really kind of dive into it. And I kind of just did a lot of things where I taught myself a lot. I watched movies, I watched music videos, right? When like MTV and TRL, like
I think we're exactly the same age, so you don't need to explain anything to me.
Awesome, cool. Yeah, so it's so interesting now when I have to like say that because I'm like, oh yeah, I forget.
Yeah. No, I think what's interesting is like the prominent Native actors you see out there. It's like they rose to stardom because like they rose with a kind of lower tier indigenous filmmaker that kind of got like Sterling Harjo and people that like bring up people that they just kind of worked with for a long time. So are there any like indigenous or like Native filmmakers that you've worked with up to this point where like that are Navajo or really anything that like are kind of on the verge of or are starting to do like larger things?
Yeah. So I have worked with a couple this year for sure. So I worked with Morningstar Angeline on a project back in October, and she's actually an advisor on the board for the mixed media story company I started this year. So I started my own company.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, for the very reasons you just explained. So it's been awesome to have Morningstar to really just be there to kind of guide me through this whole industry because she's had such extensive experience and so it's been really great to connect with her. I've worked recently with Nathaniel Fuentes, who's local around here in Santa Fe this past weekend. And I only hope to do more. I actually took an extensive break from film for a really long time. And that's because of just my experience in, not being quote unquote native enough to be representative of like the community and the people that I know to be, right? And so,
would they deem you like ethnically ambiguous? Like you don't have like,
totally. Like it was like they had such a clear, and when I say they, I'm talking specifically about like, Hollywood film industry.
Yep. I get you.
Is they have a set image, right? Of like, who is native looking enough and who isn't. And for me, I kind of was not necessarily a stereotypic phenotype of what a native person looks like. I'm very, I guess, different in the way that I look, that sometimes a lot of those roles that, called for a native person were not roles that I could get because it was either one, I remember being told I was too modern, apparently. And so I was like, oh, like I never even thought of what that means. And I was like, in my early 20s, I was like 20, 21. Yeah. So I was like very kind of taken back and really kind of very frustrated because, I was seeing people on the regular who either one didn't really have a lot of native, like in terms of like connection to their native communities as much as, someone like me who was born and raised in knew that life
And
as I am.
and that's like that whole thing. I mean, one, that situation is bullshit because if I saw you like anywhere, I would be like, hey, she looks Navajo, you know, and like you look Navajo, you know, like I would see it, but
Yeah.
if not native, I'm like, okay, like for sure.
Yeah.
But I think what sucks is it puts us in a position to almost like attack each other in a way and like peg each other down. One, because we're like, well, they're not really from the res, or they don't speak their language, or they're not connected, or yeah, their whole family's from the city. Like it really pits us against each other to see them thrive when really it's a system that is founded on stereotypes of which just what you said. You don't look native enough, which is crazy. It's so
Yeah.
stupid. It's
Yeah.
unfair, you know?
Yeah. And so, I mean, and I was, like I said, very young and I was very impressionable, um, and I just had to constantly go up against that barrier all the
Mm-hmm.
time. And so after, like, having to decide whether or not if I wanted to play people of other ethnicities, like I would get told I had an Asian look, so I could probably play like Filipino, or I
Mm-hmm.
could play someone who was, East, like like Southeast Asian, and I just didn't feel comfortable with that. I was like, like I get it's a job, and I get that this is a position to be in where you take on the characters of an individual, and but I just didn't feel comfortable in representing a person, a cultural person from a culture that I did not have any connection to. Like I could not feel comfortable playing a Filipino individual because I'm not Filipino. I didn't grow up in that culture. So
Especially where we are with indigenous people, native people. I mean, we have our own path that we have to follow. It's like I barely even know who I am, you know, because of the history that my people in this country, my own family, uh, let alone portraying some other people. There are some other actors that really just kind of do it. They do it for the money is the wrong way to say it, but, you know, continue to building up those creds. It's like, you have to do that, you know, you have to be playing ambiguously indigenous or ethnically ambiguous characters to get more and more work, to really work with other directors, other actors, so they can vouch for you in the industry and you can be, you know, more credible. And it's like,
yeah,
if you're not willing to make that sacrifice, it's really hard for you.
you don't get the jobs.
Yeah.
So
No,
yeah.
it's unfortunate that you take that moral high ground. I consider it a high ground because that's not right for someone to expect you to be, you know, ethnically ambiguous if that's not your choice, you know. But
Yeah.
you're
And
penalized for that.
yeah, and I really wanted to showcase the diversity, but also just how in depth and complex Native people can be. Like we're
Mm-hmm.
all super different based on, like you said, our backgrounds. Like some of us are very well connected to everything, and some of us are still learning. Some of us are relearning, and so I felt like there was a lack of depth that was being um, offered as like, okay, well, here's this role, but it's still the same type of
Mm-hmm.
role all the time. And the same actors and actresses get the same roles all the time because they fit that standard. And so, so after just feeling super frustrated and, I was like, you know what, like, I'm just not gonna do it anymore. And
Mm-hmm.
so I didn't do any sort of acting or film stuff. Not even dance stuff, because I felt the same way with dance. Like dance
Oh
was kind of
gosh.
like, yeah, the same thing. If you don't meet the standard of the industry, the dance industry, then you don't get jobs. And so I just I took a break. That's when I had my daughter and kind of just started, teaching and working with kids. And that was where I really kind of had the motivation to come back to what I'm doing now, because I was back home on the res and I was working with kids just for free. I was teaching after school dance classes at like my old high school.
God, I wish
And
you were in my town when I was coming up. I would have signed up for that. There's no access to that. I love that you're
yeah,
doing that. I
yeah,
love that you're
like,
doing that.
yeah. So I just kind of saw this need, right? Of
Mm-hmm.
like, even if it's like kids who are not necessarily wanting to do it as a profession, they don't want careers in
Mm-hmm.
acting or dancing or whatever. It's that kind of feeling of expression, and that like, I can do this because it makes me feel really good.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started seeing how much I enjoyed working with kids. And so that's kind of where I started. I went back for teaching. I went back for my teaching degree, and
Oh, good for you.
yeah, and it was in that time where I started connecting more and more with other artists. And by this point in time, there was that kind of movement, right? Whereas we are right now, it's kind of like this, like the closest I could describe it is like this renaissance, right, of Native creativeness that's happening, right? Where like a lot of people in Native communities are really advocating for that ability to have the same accessibility and the same platform to be able to represent themselves and their communities in the best ways that they want to, and to have that full control of that, right? And so it was around that time that that was happening more, and that's something I've always been like pushing for. Like it's just like what I've always wanted to do. And so I was like, like I think
this
this is
feel
a
great
good
though to like see that finally happening, right?
Oh my God, yes. You have no idea. Like I just remember like a conversation one time I had with someone in the industry when I was, like I said, 19, 20. And the thing that they told me was like, oh, well, there's really no place for Native actors in Hollywood other than Westerns. And that's basically it. And I was like, oh, okay. I was just like, dang, all right. So now in this time and era when we're seeing more and more just different stories of Native people, and it's really exciting for sure. I feel very
you know what sucks is like you would have thought that. So let's just remove our youth from our voices. Let's just say like, oh yeah, when I was 19, I went to Hollywood and they told me there's just no place for Native people unless it's a Western. I would have thought like it was like a John Wayne era, like in the 50s, 60s. This is like in 2010, you were told that, like that's crazy.
Yeah, not that long ago.
It just tells you like, like actions speak louder than words. Like we say all the like positivity things and like try to be woke on the external thing, but really like Hollywood, they choose who they want and don't want. And it's clear that I think now it's up to us to just kind of tell our own stories on our own. And it's kind of what you're doing. I wanted to talk about a piece of work that you got a grant for recently. So you got you got the Senator John Pinto Native American Filmmakers Memorial Fund. They need an acronym. just telling you that. Yeah, but 20 Native filmmakers from the New Mexico area are given this, are each given like so it's like $100,000 grant, and each of like the 20 people are given.
No, it was 5. It was 5. It was supposed to be 10, but then COVID happened, and then they were like,
oh,
it's in half now.
So now every single one of you get 5.
Yeah.
And what I thought was cool is like, I mean, I want to talk about your work and what you hope to do with that, but it's a testament to like, I'm glad these things are out there to help you and filmmakers like you just get your word out there, get your message out there, get your work out there. Most importantly. But you look at the names on there too, and like it's Forrest freaking Goodluck was on there. I would have thought like he doesn't need money, he's like way out there. But yeah, I just thought that was like pretty cool that like you're on there. And then the board who actually looked at all of the work, I was really surprised. Like Chris Hare is on there, Ramona Emerson, Nanaba Becker. Like these are prominent Native people in film, and I'm just like, man, how did that feel? That like they looked at your work and they were like, yeah, I want to do this, or I want that to be funded.
Yeah, no, I definitely, like I said, because of just, I've started doing a lot more filmmaking. It was just something I did for fun on the side. Right. And so it wasn't until like about 3 years ago, I really started like kind of wanting to do it more.
Nice.
And so, yeah, me and my creative partner, Ernie Zahn, who is the co-founder of the company with me, Senato, that's the company that we co-founded this year. We really wanted to work on a project together that could, one, show us a story of like my experience as a single parent, as a Native single parent, right? And have it.
Your work is called Mother's Day, correct?
Yeah, it's called Mother's Day.
Okay.
Yeah. So the story is very personally related to me, but also like I feel it could be relatable to anyone. Even if you're not Native, that relatability of having to carry a lot of that responsibility as a single parent in a household. And so I had this idea, and he was the one who was like, hey, like you should write a short film about it. And I was like, yeah, cool. I'm down for that. It's just like, why not?
Yeah.
And so he and I co-wrote it together. And I, around that time was, I had heard about the grant. And so then we applied for the grant. Shared our script in our treatment with them, and they liked it, and they, yeah, and I worked with Nanaba actually on Nemo. So
Oh,
that's how I
nice.
know. Yeah, that's how I know Nanaba.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and so you know, I had established myself as an artist as through dance for
Mm-hmm.
quite some time, and so a lot of the times people know me for dance, and so this was a kind of new venture of filmmaking that, even though I had done it before, just as like for fun,
Right.
to just
Right.
make fun videos and whatnot, that a lot of my directing style is very much body oriented, because I am
Interesting.
so much a mover. And
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of the times when I am filming and when I'm directing, I think a lot about the body. Not just the dialogue, not just the facial expressions, but it's like, where's the body in relation to the other person, to the space, to the land around it, so that's kind of like the approach that I'm doing to this project, but I want to bring that approach to all the projects that I do. Like, I'm not just wanting to direct, but I also want to focus on movement directing as much as the
So
other stuff.
this grant was given for work that's in pre-production, production, or in post. Where are you at with that right now?
Well, right now, I've been on hold because of COVID. So
Understandable. Yeah.
I'm hoping to film in May. I was supposed to film in October, but the timeline of just like, the cases started spiking up a lot in October, and I just didn't feel safe enough to put not just my safety, but of course the safety of everyone involved in the project. The other actor who is going to be in the film with me. So I delayed the filming to May.
Got it.
Fingers crossed, because it's all I need to do right now is film. That's the next
Oh,
step, is
okay.
filming.
So you guys, okay.
Yeah. So we have everything else, like in terms of, storyboard, shot list and all that. It's just, having that kind of meter of, is it safe enough to film? Do we feel comfortable in filming? And so even with that, we have to definitely take into account like all the protocols to make sure that everyone is safe and is able to do that.
Will you be in it, or will be different actors?
Yes,
Okay.
I will be in it because I want to show my acting skills.
Yeah. Right. You have to. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's like, it's so funny sometimes when people tell me, they're like, why aren't you acting more? And I was like, I just don't have the right look. But in this case, I wrote this, so
yeah, you're gonna. I I looked in the mirror. I have the right look for this film.
Yeah. And so it'll be also a chance to showcase my acting ability, because before I started dancing and do anything else, like I was training to be an actor, and that's what I originally wanted to do, was to act.
I almost want to have like a 5-part just series on you, because you're so multifaceted. I think that's so interesting. Is like, you're an actor, you're a dancer, you're a choreographer, and you're a voice actor. I mean, you have to be an actor to be a voice actor, but I feel like those are so, like, they're not the same thing. They're so,
oh my gosh, it's so different.
And yeah, I'm excited for this work. I'm excited for you to continue to get work like that and get grants. But I will say your acting really shows in your TikTok videos. And so, you have like over 10,000 followers on TikTok, and it's I see you blowing up eventually. You're like at a point where it's like you're going to be at 100,000 million followers in no time, because your videos are just awesome. Like your collaboration with Dogface for the La Bamba scene, that was great. But like his, it's very obvious he doesn't act. But your side as Rosie, like, you did fantastic. That was amazing. And I do you think that there's ever a time when like you could use TikTok as like a platform of like, hey, here's a display of some of my work, Like,
I hope so, because I mean, even if it's not me, like there are a lot of people on TikTok that I see that are really great, and sometimes it's the same deal. Like, they just don't have that ability for those opportunities because maybe their hair was too long, or their hair wasn't short enough, And so I think like being able for that platform to be a way to showcase your talent, I think it has like unlimited possibilities. Like, of course there's like all the things about the algorithm and whatnot, but like, it's so funny because I honestly just didn't think too much about it. I just was like, oh, this could be really fun to just like, do duets and do the scenes from like movies and kind of like indigenize it, right? Like
Uh-huh.
a popular one that I have as well is the Native Miranda Priestley one.
Oh,
from the
that's okay. So that might be my favorite one.
Yeah.
That one. Yep.
Yeah. And
That's a great
so,
video.
yeah. So I just had this idea, like just on the spur of the moment, to just like, take these very popular movie like scenes and just throw a dash of indigeneity in it. And so, and people started responding to it a lot because they were like, oh my God, like, that's great. Like, keep doing more. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay.
The Miranda Priestley one is where I could really see that you're a good actor, because it was all in the subtlety, you just had your arms crossed the whole time. But it was like in your facial expressions, your subtle eyebrow raises. And I'm just like, man, this person really knows how to act, And then I think that's what really got me going down the rabbit hole of like, why doesn't she get work? This is crazy. But there are tons of people like you, I'm sure, that are just indigenous, that have so much to offer, but they don't have the right quote unquote look. And I'm happy that things like TikTok can, we'll get to a point where it's just like, hey, you have to, you're crazy if you don't cast people like this that are this talented. So it adds visibility to the masses, to the audience, that we can say like, there's better actors than this person, like so-and-so, like Natalie Benally, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Like, I mean, like I said, because a lot of the things that I pay attention to when I'm watching actors, like Meryl Streep, honestly, is like one of my biggest, like, her and Viola Davis are two of the actors that I study a lot in terms of body, like in terms of what their bodies do in a scene. I think that's just the dancer in me. I'm always like, oh, what's their arm doing? What's their lips doing? And so, I find that to be, I had a professor in college who told me, like as an actor, you should always make time to take dance classes. Like, it doesn't matter if you're not a dancer, or if it doesn't matter if you think that you'll have a career in dance. Like, dancing and being aware of your body is so important as an actor, to have in your arsenal of skills. And so I really took that because, one, I love to dance. It's just me as a person, but also it really allows me to go there, like really go there physicality. Cause then it's like, I'm not just doing the face, but it's, the little hand flicks and, and the little things with the hand that she does, and the little head tilts, and
that's all. You don't notice that until it's not there, like you could have somebody stand in the exact same position, doing the exact same lip syncing, but if the subtlety of movement isn't with it, you're not sold on it. And I think that's such a interesting thing, that someone like you, who is a dancer, that just like that second nature to you, I'm sure at this point. I think that's great that you can convey all that. I want to talk about your influences, because being from Gallup, not a whole lot of positive influences, I'm sure, in the film industry. But really also like what got you, like, dance is the one. I think a lot of Native youth, I'm sure you saw, are just like, man, I wish I had someone like you. Like, you're so awesome, you're doing this. But like, and I made that comment of like, I wish I had someone like you who would have came and offered hip hop dance classes. Cause I don't know, I was too shy. Maybe I wouldn't have done it, but I would have loved to have the opportunity, because we don't have that. So like, what were your influences of like film or music videos of like, because there weren't Native people doing that. There aren't Navajo hip hop dancers that like on the mainstream.
Yeah. Well, I definitely owe it a lot to the Black community.
For sure.
In terms of his hip hop, like, that is Black people, that is Black culture. Those are Black voices that really allowed everyone else to be able to feel that connection and that relatability of what that culture was expressing and what it needed to express. And so whenever I teach hip hop, or whenever I am giving that knowledge that was given to me by someone in the community, I always acknowledge that this is Black culture. Like, so, there's this intermix that we have as, Natives doing hip hop and being in the hip hop scene. But first and foremost, always honoring is a huge part for me, like honoring where these dance forms came from, where these music styles came from, right? And so for me, that's where it all started. Because, I of course was very, very much a big fan of Michael Jackson as a kid, just in terms of his performances and just him as a performer, like not just as a singer and a dancer, but just the way he would be on a stage and like just the command,
just the presence, right?
Yeah. And so I
think I think there's so much, like I grew up loving, Save the Last Dance and Honey, and You Got Served. And I think it was just because that's the closest thing to, I always talk about, there was not enough natives on TV that I had to just glom onto anything. Like I was talking about, I interviewed Sterling Harjo the other day, and I wanted his opinion on this about Good Will Hunting. I'm like, I love Good Will Hunting because it's a leaving the res story. It's the only leaving the res story I have, because we don't have that, at the major motion picture level. And you watch movies like Selena, natives absolutely go bonkers over Selena because like, hey, there's someone that kind of looks like me that's awesome represented on screen. And I think in the hip hop community, you could say the same. That it's like finally like non-white people on TV, I'll take it, and you just love it. And I love that you continue to do those classes, and you're a great dancer. You can see it in your TikTok videos. You're just like, man. And then on your Instagram page, I think what is your favorite, I guess, kind of dance to?
Oh, that's so hard.
Yeah. Well,
I think
that's like, so I guess like that's like asking, what's your favorite food? I guess like, so what keeps you doing dance, I guess, is a better way to do it, better way to say it.
I mean, I consider myself a student always, like I don't ever really see myself as like, oh, I've gotten to a level where now I'm like good, right? Like I don't have to learn anymore. Like I will always continuously strive to learn, even if it's like going back to the basics, going back to fundamentals. I teach a lot about fundamentals. Like, you could do all this choreography and do all these cool things, but if you don't know the basis of what that is and where it comes from and how that like certain bounce lives in all these styles, then, then you're really not, I feel like, well-rounded in that way. But I mean, personally, I love popping. I mean, I remember watching breaking and breaking 2, and just like seeing how, I think it's just the ability to contort the body and make the body just seem so like alien in a way, like it just is so like the movements in popping just make me feel so like non-human but human at the same time, if that makes any sense.
No, I get it.
Yeah, so I really enjoy popping. Like that's the style that I've always loved and the style I always will dance no matter what. And so that's my love right there. I know I was supposed to meet up with some popping friends today, and I was like, oh, I'm doing a podcast. I'll just meet up with you guys maybe some other time. Like we just do Zoom sessions and we just cipher with each other online, which is interesting, but it helps us through this time. And the other, I think I really like styles that are really based in that funk sound. So like popping, boogaloo, locking, just things that are more influenced through that funkiness, like when I hear like, the trumpets and like the guitar in some music, I'm always like, oh man, like that's got a funky sound. Like that's just kind of where a lot of my gravitation goes towards that. But I also really enjoy house.
Yep.
House is a style that I kind of dabble in sometimes. I really like the freeness of it. It makes me feel really just grounded whenever I like push myself into the earth when I'm doing that style. I want to get better at that style for sure.
when I hear you talk about dance, I'm just like, I thought I liked dance. Like this woman lives dance, it's like, so that I took a quote from one of your videos that you have posted on YouTube, from 2019, when you were asked the question, what does dance mean to you? And you got a little emotional, but I will kind of just read the quote. Dance is how I heal. It's how I accept the light and the dark within myself. It's how I communicate between everything that is beauty and everything that is flawed, and in a way that I honor myself, my family, my ancestors. When I dance because moves that we create, they don't have life to it because they weren't supposed to exist until we make them exist. It's horizon, it's the balance of everything. Bars. You're a goddamn poet. That was when I heard that, I had to like stop, and I'm like, I have to tell her that quote, because that's one that was off the top of your head. That's why I said bars. That was fantastic. But I never thought of dance in that way, of what you were saying, of like, these things didn't exist until I make it into existence. And I think that's almost like a really responsible way to look at dance.
Yeah. And I think that's why that responsibility is also the reason why I stress the need to always also understand the cultural connection that dance has to whatever style it is. Like it is that responsibility of carrying that tradition and those stories and those voices with you. And for me, that's, obviously like the stories of my ancestors in my Dene community, but also the ancestors and stories and voices of the Black community, that created these art forms in the first place. And so I think that's why when I do dance, it's because I carry all of that with me in my body in those moments where I'm moving, that I will dance until I can't dance anymore. Until I and even if I have, broken bones and, I have arthritis or whatever, I will always move no matter what, for that reason.
That's awesome. That was a wonderful video that was circulating for a while. I think she was a prima ballerina, or she was an older ballerina from years ago. She was in a nursing home, and they were playing her like the music from one of her routines. Yeah. And she was doing all the hand movements, even though she was bound in the wheelchair. She just took on this life, and I was in tears at the end of that short video. But I mean, she was in such bliss. So I completely, that sounds like an amazing just thing to hold on to, that you're going to hold on to for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
I want to talk about something you have in your TikTok videos that you mentioned. You want to do a Native musical someday. Yeah. And so I kind of heard you, another thing to add to your resume, you can sing really well. And you're my voice is a little flat today, but, and then you just say, you sound like a freaking, songbird afterwards. But I'm just man, when you sing Victor, and it's great. So I think, one, that's awesome, because I've never seen a Native musical, but two, what does that look like to you? I guess in terms of casting, is that going to be a play for you kind of thing, or would that be on screen? Theater, I guess on screen.
Yeah, I've had a love for musicals always, all the time, because it's singing, dancing, and acting all at the same time.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of musical theater, in college, and continue to do it every so often. And so I had done a Native musical a few years back. That was not a great experience. I feel like there was a lot of corners cut, and I was you know what, it's funny because I always tell people, appreciate the really awful jobs, just appreciate them, because they really show you how much more you can do, and how much more confidence you should have when you think that you can do something and make it great.
So I don't want you to put anyone on blast if you don't want to, but I mean, just was it not a Native perspective? Was it just the production, the way it was produced, or?
Yeah, it is a lot of things.
Oh, okay.
Well, it's a lot.
So you were being nice when you said cutting corners. Okay, I understand.
I was. There was a lot of things that happened, but it also showed me that, hey, you know what? If I can do this, then I should. And I need to have the confidence to do it. So always take those, as awful as it may feel in the moment, and you're just oh my God, why did I ever do that? Honestly, they're there for reasons, and their reasons is to teach you and to help you grow. And so I've always had a love for musicals, because I've done them so much. And I honestly was it's the same deal as with film, there's not really a lot of representation, necessarily good representation of Native people in musicals. I mean,
if anything, I'm sure it's worse. I'm sure they're further behind than film, because it's less of a spotlight.
I mean, that's I did a paper in college about Annie Get Your Gun, for example, right? They have Native people in that show. However, it's the most stereotypical way of portraying Natives in a show, correct? And Peter Pan, and I'm forgetting the other one. But it just I feel that's another realm that I definitely want to rip apart.
Right. Well, it definitely needs it. I think that there has been no renaissance in that industry in theater, and I feel especially in an industry that's founded on representation is not important, we'll just get boys to play women, and we'll just, the history of theater, I feel it's this, we'll make do with what we got because we're theater. And, but it really, at a certain point, it's not acceptable, because we have the opportunity to tell our own stories. And it's awesome that someone like you is going to say, hey, I'll step up, I'll do this. If no one wants
and there's a whole lot of other people too, who are I mean, there's a lot of Native theater companies that are, coming about, there's, I had a burp.
That's fine.
I just ate like a papusa, so I'm like really full.
Yep.
So I mean, there's Two Worlds Theater that's in Albuquerque right now, right? That's a theater company here that I've done some work with.
Awesome.
And there's also New Native Theater in Minneapolis, Native Voices at the Autry, which is a pretty well-known one in LA. So I feel like there is, you know, a lot of playwrights and a lot of directors and Native-run theater companies. Oh, there's another one too that just started in Oklahoma. I'm forgetting it. Telatusa, I think it was. I worked with a director from there, but
cool.
There's more that is happening. It's like, you know, it's like there with film. There's more building up right now, and I think the momentum is picking up to where a lot more Native writers and a lot more Native playwrights are creating these works for the stage. And so, yes, I would love to be a part of that as well, to either one, like I said, write a musical or choreograph it. Who knows? Be in it, who knows?
I think it would be fantastic. What advice would you have for really anybody listening that wants to learn more about, not learn, but just like see more art at the level that you're talking about? Like like art that's not mainstream. Like, where would you look? Who would you talk to? What resources do you have? Unfortunately, it's probably not all consolidated, so you'd have to go different places. I think that's something that even for myself, I'm just curious.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think again, I think that's changing. I think that there is this push to create those spaces and to create these sort of collective spaces where people who are wanting to do the same things are coming together and developing these. Either you know, an organization for all of these artists here in the Southwest, or it's something across the United States. It's happening slowly, because I see a couple of people who are in theater or are in film really coming together to, you know, create these spaces, because it's like, if we're not given these places at the table in this so-called arena, right, then let's make our own. Let's do it in the ways that we know how to do it, and in the ways that we want, and make our own, and really make it. I think a lot of the times when I speak with people who are kind of like in the same place that I am, it's really about community, and really about how do we be artists and be in this realm of artistry, but also remembering that our communities are just as equally important in that space as us. Because I always tell that to people, you know, like, I don't ever go into a space for myself. It's the people and the community I care about the most. That's the driving force of why I put myself in those uncomfortable spaces at times, right? Like, I'm the only brown person here. Cool, you know? But it's changing. I think more and more collectiveness and collaborations we have as artists, and these more smaller, more grassroots like ways of doing things, the more that we can, I guess, not bow down to this industry that has kind of held the gates for so long, and really build something that represents what we really want. And envision.
Do you think you want, you know, for those of you that are listening, she kind of did a gesture of these like two pillars, with like Hollywood being one, and then us having to build another one. Yeah. Do you think, do you want to go into Hollywood again and kind of rewrite what they're doing? Or do you think it's just like starting our own thing completely separate from it?
Yeah, that is.
They'd be like, hey, I see money in that. And then they'll obviously want what we're doing, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that is the question I have in my mind all the time, to be quite honest. It's the question I have in my mind whenever, like I said, people ask me, you know, like, why don't you have an agent? Why aren't you trying out for these roles in Hollywood? Why? And honestly, I'm very hesitant. I'm very scared to, because I don't want to subject myself to the treatment and the experiences I had as a 20-year-old. But I also know that in order to change the game, sometimes it means putting yourself in the game. And so that's kind of where I feel sort of this inner confliction on whether or not, do I want to do this in this avenue, or do I strictly stay in this, like, not strictly, just stay in this like, you know, this mindset of like, we could do this in a different way that doesn't need that validation from this.
100% with you. You know, Audre Lorde said something along the lines of the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. Like, it's so hard to determine where you want to fit yourself in there. Like, do you want to try to rip it apart from the inside, from the industry? How much inertia are you going to be up against? Like, how much power will you really have? Or do you want to try to do it like the harder, longer way? But the payoff might be worth it, exponentially more so than trying to do it from the inside. I completely see that dichotomy that you're talking about. And I understand it because, 20, you hold on to those experiences because you're trying to figure out who you are, and it's like, I don't know what I would have done with myself had I had that experience where someone tells me like, you're not native enough. And it's just like, it's just like, what do you mean I'm not native enough? I'm Navajo from Gallup, I'm this and this and this. And it's just like, that's,
I got the scars. I got the beat up knees.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, you got the chizzy knees.
I got the chizzy knees. I got all the battle scars of like a childhood on the res,
Yeah. I think with that, growing up and now, like, do you have any favorite like native films or native things that are produced, like native art? I guess more like the film and television arena that you glom onto, and you're like, that's hope. That's great. That's a step in the right direction.
Yeah. Oh man.
You're like the third person I've done this to. I really need to like send you this question before.
Yeah, I know. I was like, wait, hold on. Well, I think my big issue with that is I feel as much as there has been progress, I still think it's the same story told over and over again. Like, of course, I will always have my favorites of like, like I love Dance Me Outside. That's a classic. Like I just enjoy that film. I mean, you think about Smoke Signals, you think about, I really enjoy, it was like a made for TV series. I think it was called Dream Keepers, where it was like they, had a storyteller telling the stories of all these different tribes in the US. And it was really cool because you got to see the diversity of like Native people. And I think that that is one that really stuck with me as a young person. And because I think that came out when I was like in high school. And I just remember being like, oh my God, like there are all these stories of all these other Native people in this world that I didn't even like think about, And so I think that was like the time where I actually did see like the diversity and the kind of not blanket, but like the weaving of all these people who are First Nation and, sort of tying it into the story of like, how do these stories keep being told? Right. So I think that for me is like, I think that's because it's geared towards like the youth. Right. And a lot of the things that I work on is for youth. And so I think that's why that particular series is something that kind of sticks to me. I mean, I think I even have it on Prime, like Amazon Prime, because I really love it.
I was just thinking, like, I think that's the only place I see it available. Unfortunately, it's not like it's like video on demand. You got to go rent it from somewhere, and I think it's Prime.
Yeah, but and I think like most of the time, I crave stories and movies about Native people that is not just about the downsides of being Native. Like, I mean, you think a lot about how Native representation is in film. It's a lot of depressing stuff.
For sure.
It's a lot of sad stories.
Out of all the movies I've reviewed, like that's one of my biggest gripes is like poverty porn. I mean, that's kind of what it's termed. In every single movie where there's natives, at least non-period pieces, like there's usually an element of that, of like, look how sad these people are, like Wind River. Yeah. Wind River was a huge example of that, and just like there was no positivity in that. I'm just like, geez, we either get killed or we live like in poverty or we're drug addicts. I'm like, thanks a lot, Taylor Sheridan. Like I was just so like, I was so disappointed in that movie because when I first saw it, I was just like, man, this movie's awesome because I saw it in theaters, and then I redid an episode and I'm like, man, what was I thinking the first time I saw that? That was not good.
Yeah.
You see stories like Blood Quantum and Indian Horse where they're just powerful films, and they're like different in a way. They're told by Native people from the Native lens, and I think that Renaissance feels different this time around to me. I feel I in talking Sterling Harjo yesterday, he kind of brought up, and in a few interviews I've heard of his in the past, it's like there was this supposed uprising when Smoke Signals came out in the independent film industry for Native stories, and then just the door like closed, and there was just for a long time like this dry spell, and we're kind of coming up on that now. And I don't know if it's gonna stay, but it's exciting to see work like that, but it's frustrating also because you see people like you that just still continue to not get work, and at least at that level, because that would be awesome, you know.
Yeah.
So some native kid, my kid, can see someone like you representing, and I'm like, son, that's a Navajo lady, you know, that she's from Gallup, and he can be like, that's awesome, you know, because
Yeah.
we didn't have that, you know. I had to have my uncle say like, hey, you see that guy Predator, he's native, you know. And
Yeah.
that was like the closest we had, you know. There wasn't a whole lot of that, which is really unfortunate. So
Yeah, and I think that's because there are more native writers right now that are writing the stories, and I think that was kind of where, in terms of just the difference I saw of like how non-native writers portray natives as the same archetype, right? The same type of story, the same type of image. Whereas I think right now there's more native writers who are coming about who really want to write stories that are different and that show a different light. And I think that's kind of where I want to go with things. I want to make films and portray Native people as empowered people and not just like, you know, the down on our luck kind of people. Which is, you know, a project I'm actually working on right now that I've been working on for quite some time. We're so close to having a 6th draft done. I'm like, oh my God, we're so there. We're almost there. But it's
draft,
really,
my gosh.
so yes, it's been because I want it to break apart the, particularly the Western genre. Like I have had a love-hate relationship with Westerns for as long as I can remember, because one, they're the only places that people will know natives from. It's like, oh, Westerns. But I also want to take that genre and like turn it up on its head. That's my mission with this story that I'm working on, this script. And that's a project that I'm working on, which people are really interested in it. Like we've had like some studios who like want to see it when it's done when our 6th draft is done, and some people. But I want it to be, because we're calling it the anti-Western Western. Because it really is a story from the native perspective where the non-native characters are actually straight up the supporting people. Like there are more lines and action driven by the native characters. And it's also a story about 3 strong, complex native women that are the center of the story. Particularly, it's a Diné story, so it'll be around Diné people.
I think what's frustrating is like the native women are never represented with any strength. I like Blood Quantum is my favorite movie of last year because 2 years now, is because Joss. I don't know. Have you seen that movie? Blood Quantum?
I did. Yeah.
So Joss, the main character, I love her. One, she's a single mom. You know, she's Forrest Goodluck's dad or mom. She's like chops wood at the beginning of the movie, and you know, at the very end, I say she's a nurse. She has a career. At the very end, when they're sitting in the canoe, you have no feeling of like, oh no, I hope a man comes and helps them out. I hope they find a community of men. You're just like, no, Joss has got it. You know, she's a nurse. She can chop wood. She can do this. And like, it's so rare that like on one hand, I can count like strong Native women in major motion pictures, and so it's exciting what you're talking about, like to show that's like the whole thing you want to push. Like that's your whole story, is like to uplift this trio of women, of Native women, and that's exciting. I really hope that gets greenlit and you can do it, run with that. And so is that TV show, movie,
feature film?
Feature, okay.
Yeah, feature film. Yeah, and so. Yeah, so that's a script that I've been working on with Ernie for the last, not just with Ernie, but we've had a couple of collaborators as well. I joined in just because I am a Navajo woman, and I have that perspective, and I have this sort of, it's really also tying in a lot of me in that story as well as a Diné person, because the story is about a Diné group of people, and it takes place about 12 years, I believe, after the Long Walk. I think it's like 12 years, yeah. And it's really just there's no like damsel in distress kind of feel to it. It's really about like these women or girl, well, one of them's technically a preteen, she's like 11, 12. So but she so it's about just how they have to kind of figure out the situation that they got themselves into. And and it's really also going to have a lot of movement. I'm going to be the movement director. So I'm going to be all about like helping the actors figure out how to make sure that they're using their bodies as well as a tool to tell the story as much as the words are. And then we also want the land to be as much a part of a character as in the film as the people.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it's called Sixth and Bisty. If you look at our Senato website, you'll see a sizzle trailer that we filmed to kind of like show our concept of the film. And anytime anyone sees it, they're just like, when is this movie happening? When is this going to come out? And I was like, we just got to make sure that, like, for me, like, I just want the story. I want the story to empower people. I want people to look at it and see themselves in a way where it's like, that is the strength and the resilience that we've always known. And here is a prime example of it. Like, you know, like that's all I ever want is to be able to show that.
I think that's why, you know, I liked Indian Horse. It was like that. It showed at the very end, you're just like, man, these are strong people, you know, like you can go through all that. Yeah, there was, you know, ups and downs. So for us to have a movie like that, that would be amazing. Especially nobody talks about The Long Walk in movies, let alone 12 years after, which is what I always wonder of, like, what were we doing after they said, all right, gates are open, you guys are free to go.
You guys are back. Yeah, you guys are able to go home, you know. So
and it's not like they jumped on a train. You had to go back. I always wanted to hear like a historian like document the trail back home, you know, like what those interactions were like, and just like the trauma and terror, and like, did they really let us go? Is it for real? You know, like those are stories that I want to be told, like not from a like, oh, it'd be entertaining, but just to know, like, I think those are important stories for people to hear in America, like as Americans today, as we see ourselves. It's like, we need to see what kind of like trauma this country was founded on, and to see what resilience really looks like when you look at a Native person. So that way, when we see Natalie Benally, we don't say shit like, oh, you don't look Native enough, you know. We say like, man, that's a real Native. Those are strong people. That's awesome. You know, I would love for that to change the narrative, because man, that just sounds exciting. The work that you're doing.
Yeah. So once that we're, like I said, we're almost there. Like, I think we have 2 more writing sessions to just kind of like hash out more of the details and really make it the strongest script it can be. So that way, when the people who do want to see it and read it, who are interested in helping and funding, can be able to be able to believe in that story in the way that I believe it. Like that's the thing that is exciting for me, is that this is a story that I really believe in, and that I know is a great story, and it needs to be told. And so got a lot of exciting things to work on for sure.
It sounds like it. Well, you know, last thing, do you want to plug your social media?
Yeah, so you can find me my account as like my work as, you know, Natalie Benally as a dancer and choreographer and dancer and all that, is Nat Ben Dance on Instagram. It's also just Natalie Benally on Facebook as well. And then my company with Ernie Zahn is at Senato, which is TSENATO. You can find us on Instagram. You can also find us at senato.com. And then I'm also on TikTok at NatNative88. That's where I do a lot of my acting stuff currently.
Absolutely. I love that. You gotta follow her on TikTok. That's great. You know, let's go on one TikTok tangent before we go. Okay. The Disney princess thing, when how did that feel when, like, I don't know, I say fans, you know, when people viewing your TikTok, like when you were like, well, what would be a character or an animal that would go with a native, you know, TikTok princess or a native princess, native Disney princess, and they came up with the horny toad. That was it was funny because like, so I mean, I've had experience with Disney in the past, like doing the Nemo project, right? And so I mean, and I've always been just told that, like, you know, I have this sort of sound to my voice as very Disney, because it's very like, I can definitely see that.
Yeah. And so and this is around the time where, you know, the Disney filter, like the filter was very popular on TikTok. You know, people were like, oh, look at this, so like cool. Disney filter. And I just was like, you know, it would be really funny, is like, not funny, but just like, it would be really humorous and also very like fun if there was like a princess from the Res, right? Like, I mean, even though we know like princesses don't necessarily exist in any of our tribes, right? But it would just still be a really fun interpretation of a princess character that's from the Res, who exudes all the traits of someone from the Res, and has, you know, the animal friend who is, you know, our Che, right? And I, you know, named it Che Yajia, which is little grandpa, because it's, you know, perfect. And so I just started kind of like, playing around with this character and, just started doing stuff and, and I was really curious on what it would look like, it's just like, cause it's like one of the things I'm okay at, is drawing. So I just was like, I don't feel like I could draw this character.
Yeah.
I don't really have that skill set for it. And so I had just put out a request, I guess, to like people who are native and who are drawers and artists to like, draw the princess if they feel inclined to and her friend. And finally someone this week did that. And it was so awesome because it was just like everything that I like imagined in my head. And people were just like, this needs to happen. Like, like we need
100%.
this. Yeah. Cause I mean, it's about time, like I can't stand that the only native association with Disney is Pocahontas and Peter Pan. Like, I just can't. Like, it is a constant thing we see all the time on TikTok, right? People having to educate people all the time on why it's not okay for you to dress up like Pocahontas because Pocahontas is a real person. And the story behind that is so fabricated and, manipulated to make you believe that it's it was a consensual relationship, right? And so I think that was kind of what really also pushed me to kind of make that character and like just start doing it because it was like, here's what a princess from one of our communities would actually be like, like she would not be like, oh, haha, she'd be like, no, like I'm going to get stuff done.
Right. 100%. And that's, then she'd be mean, but soft in a way that's like, I don't know, like anti-mean, it's just it's soft and correcting in a way that really only a Navajo woman can do, only a Native woman can do. I think that definitely needs to happen. There's one short film I wanted to ask you about. Have you ever seen Masane or Shamasane by Black Horse Low? It's a black and white.
I was gonna say a long time ago.
Yeah. It's from years ago, but when you were doing the native, Disney princess, I thought of that for some weird reason. But even just a simple story like that, that needs to be told, of just like a snapshot in time of what life was like back then, or you see things. You see like Coco, and you're like, man, natives, we need to have something like that,
Yeah.
I really hope that somebody at that level just decides to greenlight something like that because
I'm ready. I
would love to see it. I'm sure you'd get a role because you're a great voice actor,
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, I enjoy voice acting a lot, actually. I think it's because like no one can see me, right? It's not about like how I look. It's more about like, can I portray the character through my voice and can I do it through this like tone, right? And so I think that's kind of where I prefer voice acting over actual like acting on film, because of that reason is that as long as I have the right vocal choice for this character, then that's great too. And it's just fun. It's just a lot of fun.
It looks like it. That's great. Well, we ran about an hour. I really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you so much. I will plug everything in a kind of outro video afterwards. And just thank you so much for being here. I'm gonna go ahead.
Thank you so much, Ian. I appreciate the ability for us to, like I said, collectively work towards this goal together. And that's
100%.
That's what it's all about.
That's what it's all about. You heard it here. Hell of a chat. I think it's obvious we can expect big things coming with Indigenous representation and Indigenous really filmmaking as a whole with people like Natalie, people like Sterling Harjo, who, by the way, I have an interview with next week. I partnered with Nomad Cast. He was gracious enough to allow me to come on to his podcast when he had Sterling Harjo on last week, and we kind of just talked about his new show, Reservation Dogs, and just shot the shit, but more importantly, learn more about Sterling. Learn more about why he is doing the things that he's doing with Reservation Dogs, and talk about how he broke out into really the film industry, and a little bit about the 1491s and how that crosses over with some of the work that he's doing right now, how his experience in Indian country framed his really film career, but also what his film career has looked like since he started out with just putting his family members in films, and then eventually doing work with the 1491s, and then the famous Wolfpack auditions video, how all that, he had a little bit of behind the scenes on that. I had a great chat with them, and I look forward to hearing that one. But let's wrap this up with Natalie. Going back to that, go check her out on TikTok, go check her out on Instagram. Always producing great content, and yeah, keep an eye out for everything that she has, and I'll continue to plug it as I see it come across. And yeah, couldn't be more excited about where things are going with people like Natalie and Sterling. All right, everybody, have a good one.